I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I can drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The deportation bus. Yes, there's a deportation bus, a candidate for governor down in Georgia. Evidently, State Senator Michael Williams. His gimmick is they're going to go around to those evil sanctuary cities and round them up and take them out with the deportation bus. The only problem is deportation bus broke down on the first leg of the tour. Yeah, there you go. The bus took a breakdown. I guess they got it fixed back on the tour. And you go, yeah, again, more of what you need. Now they're claiming. The claim is it was Antifa who put water in their gas tank. I don't know about that, but hey, you know, they say we're gonna keep an eye on the bus or the deportation bus, much closer. So there you go, way to start the day off with a broken down bus, much like our economy for the vast majority of folks. In fact, a new United Way ALICE project report came out, and ALICE stands for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed. That means you're broke. They find that nearly 51 million households across this great nation with an economy that's booming, unemployment never lower, according to the Donald, evidently can't afford to pay the monthly bills. Basic housing, basic food, childcare, healthcare, transportation, and now a cell phone is part of that. And look, in this day and age, you can't get along without a cell phone. That's the study was released today by the United Way's ALICE project. That's 43% of all households. 51 million people in households in this country. That figure includes what they're saying, 16.1 million households who are now living in poverty, as well as the 34.7 million families that are making just less than what's needed to, quote, survive in the modern economy. Now, what they say is, look, you know, despite all of these wonderful signs, the economy is growing, it's great, it's beautiful, there are still families that are facing financial hardships. And as I read this, you know, there's a way we fix this stuff. There's a way. We have a massive inequality problem in this country, and what's happening, and it's happening right before our very eyes, is the wealth class of this country has figured out that the best way to gain more for themselves is by dividing us. And as you know, and I've been very, very upfront and very straightforward with my support of labor unions and the right of workers to bargain collectively and fight for better wages, hours, conditions, all of that. I've never hidden that fact from anyone because I believe that equal partners sitting down at a table and bargaining for conditions on the job, who's going to share in what wealth, what benefits are going to be, that's the best scenario. not having government dictate, not having the employer as the master of the domain, but having partnerships and equality. And also, having the CEO who's making, 12, 20, $100 million a year, sitting down across the table from a worker representative and saying, hey, look, you're making $100 million a year. Our folks need a little bit too. Back when union density was at its height, 1965, 35% union density in this country, inequality was much less. In fact, the CEO of companies made 20 times what the average worker was making back then. That number has skyrocketed to 300 times. And that's because, well, in the private sector, you got about 6.4% union density. But yet you still hear, and I get this all the time, and this is where, you have to give the moneyed interests credit. Understand the Koch brothers and the Walton Foundation and all of these very wealthy think tanks and all of these billionaires, they're not going to spend money pushing an idea that's going to benefit you. And I don't, I guess it's one of those things that, my grandfather had a saying for it. He'd always say, if a rich guy is going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. And if he were alive today, he would look at the massive amounts of money that the Koch brothers and the Waltons and the billionaire class are spending on telling us how bad unions are. And he would say, you know what? You better go get them. Because nothing good comes when they get what they want. And, as I was reading some of there's a bunch of stuff out there. There's another one of these grand plans that the State Policy Network has put out on how they're going to go and destroy unions. And we've talked about this, over the last several months of, how there's going to be a massive, decertification campaign where they're going to hire people to go out and knock on members' doors and say, hey, you can get a rebate from your union. Here, all you have to do is sign this card. And what they're actually signing is a decertification card. And all kinds of stuff. And there's going to be tons of shenanigans and tons of nonsense coming. Union members, you're going to have to wake up and become very, very, very militant. And the hope is look, there's a hope that the labor movement becomes much more militant again. There's a hope that, the Koch brothers and their ilk have gone too far. And that eventually we come back to that realization of my grandparents' generation that if the rich guy is going to take a buck out of his pocket, we better, whatever he's advocating, we better go get the opposite. Because here's the interesting thing. One of the statistics that came out of this United Way study is that almost 2/3 of all the jobs in this country pay less than $20 an hour. Stop and think about that for a second. Almost 2/3 of all the jobs pay less than $20 an hour. So when you float the idea of a $15 an hour minimum wage, you've got all of these people, probably half the country, who barely make $15 an hour. Say, no, well, what about me? Without realizing that eventually everyone gets bumped up. But we've been so concentrated in this, mine, me, that we don't think about the big picture in this. And what was interesting is you look at these numbers and it's mind-blowing that what's happened in this country is we're the wealthiest country in the world and the wealthiest country in the history of civilization and all that. And that's undisputed. We have more wealth in this country than at any time in the history of this country. And yet it's all been consolidated into the hands of, some say the 1%, some say the 1% of 1%. I argue, about 10% of the people control the vast majority of wealth in this country. Like 90% of it, when you really stop and think about it. Most of us are in some form of debt or another. In fact, I saw something the other day that said that the average credit card debt among working people was something like $12,000. And I'm going, my goodness. You talk about company store, you talk about company script, right there in debt to the company. Granted, this it's Visa or MasterCard or whoever, but that's still like being in debt to the company that you work for because you can't quit. You're not going anywhere. And they know this. And the thing that gets me is you look at this last tax bill. What we did is we made inequality worse with this tax bill. In the past, you could argue our tax bill made things a little bit more, our tax law made things a little more equal. If you made over $1.6 million, for instance, back during, in today's dollars, back during the Eisenhower years, a good, socialist president, you paid 92% tax on that dollar over 1.6 million. So this incentive for insatiable greed, for outrageous greed wasn't there, because you said, well, you know what? Use it how we need to get things done, and put your name on buildings, build libraries, whatever. Or we're going to take it and we're going to use it. And understand, nobody paid the 92%, just so you don't get all freaked out. But they did pay considerably higher, which is how we invested in roads and bridges and built a highway system, and how we had an education system that was fully funded and, had extracurricular time and, all kinds of stuff. And which is how people would go to college and not end up with a lifetime of debt when they got out, and all of that stuff. But you look at this mass inequality, and there are far too many families that are struggling to make ends meet. And every one of us knows somebody who's struggling. And we've been trained in our mind. It's just, you got to work harder. You got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Just buckle down and work harder. When the reality is, the wages that we earn have been stagnant for 40 years. I tell this story all the time. When I started working back in the late 80s, I worked on a shipping dock making $15 an hour as a casual. Once you got onto the list, the top rate was like 18 and high change, like 1870, 1880. You got full health care, you got pension, you got paid sick days, you got vacation, you got all of these things back then. We're talking, not economic gimmickry, no calculators or anything figuring out for today's dollars or anything. It was that's what the numbers were back then. And today, doing that exact job, if I were to start out today doing that exact job, it's $14 an hour, no benefits, no health care, no pension, no matter how many hours I work, no vacation, no sick days. You get on the list, you get hired full time. It goes up to $18 an hour after a couple of years. So, even if you say, look, 14 is less than 15, 18 is less than almost 19, 30 years of deflation, 30 years of stagnation. And that has everything to do with the fact that the unions have been broken in this country. And we're on the verge of it being completely broken here. Because the Koch brothers and their ilk have spent so much money, so much resource, so much time, so much energy attacking. And also in members' ears. Because, just seconds before I came on air, someone tweeted at me going, my husband works in a union shop and he says, and here come the talking points, the union only protects the lazy people. And how many times have you heard that? I mean, thousands of times. And I say, well, the reality is if there are lazy people there, the company is, it's malpractice on their part for not to get rid of them. Because every union has a pathway, a due process to get rid of people who are not doing their job. And if the company chooses not to do that, that's not the union's fault. That's the company's fault. And the other part of it is generally the people who are pointing their finger saying that everybody else is lazy, generally that person's the lazy one. And it's interesting to me because I get this from people who, they justify all kinds of things. They justify their behavior based on what others are doing. And at the end of the day, understand, we are stronger together than we are divided. The company gave you nothing. Everything that we have, the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour day, vacations, healthcare, all of that stuff, somebody fought, bled, and died for. At some point, someone stood up and said, we demand these things. And they put their family in peril to get them. And to have people in a very flippant kind of way say, well, that doesn't matter. It's kind of infuriating. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Are you one of the 51 million families across this country struggling to make ends meet? I'd love to hear your stories. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back with Scott Paul. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We're going to find out about the ZTE bailout, the tariffs, China, so much more. Quick break, right back.
Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1980. That was the day 4,000 strikers and their supporters gathered for the March for Dignity and Respect in Laurel, Mississippi. Over 200 mostly black women members of the International Chemical Workers Union Local 882 had been on strike against Sanderson Farms chicken processing plant for 15 months. Trade unionists from as far away as Cincinnati, Memphis, and North Carolina came to march in support. Sanderson Farms had cleared $58 million in profit, but paid workers just $3 an hour. The women demanded a contract that included more control over assembly line speed, overtime pay, and insurance. They complained of desperately low wages, inhumane working conditions, and even the inability to use the bathroom when necessary. Workers were given only gloves and an apron once a month, and a file to sharpen their often dull and rusty scissors and knives. They often referred to the processing plant as the plantation, where sexual harassment was rampant. Women workers often found themselves given dangerous assignments or even fired if they didn't put up with sexual advances of their foreman. Workers maintained that strikebreakers from the community were desperately poor and threatened with violence if they quit by local Ku Klux Klansmen who worked as supervisors at the plant. Some were known to have been involved in the murder and or intimidation of civil rights workers in decades past. The plant had been organized in 1972, but was extraordinarily weak. Nonetheless, women strikers understood that the union still served as an invaluable resource in the midst of a largely unorganized South. By the following February, the NLRB ruled that Sanderson had to resume contract negotiations and allow strikers to return to their jobs. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So I've been asking the question, where are all of the Tea Party types? Where are the Oath Keepers? Where are the minions? Where are the Trump faithful? Where are all those people who, when Obama bailed out or sort of bailed out the auto industry, were screaming at the top of their lungs? Where are they now when we look at what's going on with ZTE and the bailout that, look, that's the only word I can use. We're bailing them out. Because they got themselves into a whole lot of trouble. And this administration is the one who said we're going to enforce that. And I guess now not so much. Here to talk about what's going on with China, with trade, with NAFTA, with tariffs, all of that, our resident expert, Scott Paul. He's the president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, always. Anything for you, sir.
Lots of stuff to get cleared up. First, let's talk about the ZTE bailout. I'm looking at this going, this is important national security kind of stuff. If we don't enforce what we say, what's the point in saying it?
Yeah, and this coming from a president who talked about American jobs, America first, just railed on China, always, said, if you look up his phrase like China is laughing at us, you'll get about 1,000 hits because he says that all the time, and then on Twitter makes this pronouncement that ZTE, which is just so everybody knows, is a Chinese telecommunications company. It has a lot of relationships with the Chinese government in Beijing. It has been barred from doing business in the United States because there are serious national security concerns. For instance, the military won't and didn't allow ZTE telecommunications products to be sold to the military because of the risk of spyware having been inserted, so that essentially the government of China could be spying on the U.S. military. And this is a company that not once but twice has broken our sanctions law and has been found to have been selling products into Iran and into North Korea in violation of sanctions. So, it's the unified consensus of our national security community. And I think by judging by the congressional response, an overwhelming number of Democrats and Republicans, that ZTE shouldn't be doing business in the United States. Yet here you have a president who says, there's lots of lost jobs in China, not America, China, and that, maybe there's a way to help out ZTE. It's an alarming tweet. I think it's very dangerous, and I'm very concerned about it. And my hope is that this is just kind of bluster, and he'll, that'll move on to something else without doing anything for ZTE. But it's something that, unfortunately, we have to take seriously.
Yeah, and he's going to get it done fast. We're going to just cool it. We're going to get it done fast. And I go, okay, but here's the thing. There are national security implications, and I think those are extremely important and things we should be talking about on not just telecommunications, but virtually everything our military needs. But, I've been hammered with the well, Rick, we're going to lose a lot of American jobs because of it, because, they buy a lot of our stuff. And, that argument, I don't know that holds a lot of water with me.
Yeah. So, look, it is true that there are some U.S. products that went into a ZTE phone. Qualcomm, for instance, sold some chips to ZTE, but that's not their only market. That's not to say there won't be a transition, but, saving some American jobs and putting ZTE back into business in the United States, again, I just point back to our military leaders who say this would be very dangerous. It would be a threat to our national security. And it's a threat that we should take seriously. And so everybody from Chuck Schumer to Marco Rubio has been expressing grave concerns about the president's response here. And in part, Rick, it's because it's so out of the blue. I mean, where did this come from? It just flies in the face of everything that we were led to believe about the president and his policies. And so it raises, obviously, a lot of really, really serious questions about the motivation here as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complete about face. And you go, where did it come from? But for me, the bigger picture, and, I had someone who, tweeted at me saying, well, Rick, you're not getting the big picture. And I'm going, no, I get the big picture. And the big picture is China wants to dominate the world with technology. Their China-made 2025 plan is all about taking over technology and taking over the innovation of a number of industries. And, to me, this has got to be part of that big picture talk where, yeah, maybe we're going to have some problems short term. But the big picture is they want to do what they've done to a lot of our industries, aluminum, steel, other ones being part of that, and that's completely dominate them and not play fair in the international market.
Yeah, the stakes here with respect to ZTE are really significant. I don't pretend like I'm an expert on broadband or telecommunications, but 5G is going to be the next kind of the next frontier in broadband, higher speeds, better resolution, all of that, more capabilities. And ZTE is one of the companies leading the charge on that, and to do 5G in such a way that the Chinese government is more or less writing the rules of what this new cellular system should look like. I am not a xenophobe, but I will say I do think that while we should always seek common ground with our brothers and sisters in China, and I harbor no fears about Chinese culture, most types of Chinese ideas that are coming from the people. I don't like the authoritarian government, obviously. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be wary about some of these security concerns, whether we're progressives, conservatives, moderates, anything, because this is both about writing the rules of the future, and America should have a part in that, as well as making sure that we're literally not giving the Chinese government tools to spy on our military without even trying. I mean,
Right.
they do, right? And they want to, because that's a game that big powers all play, but you don't want to give them the keys to the car and say, here, you're going to be able to find out everything about what's happening on our military bases with our citizen population. To me, that's just I'm enough of an economic nationalist, a progressive one, but to say you got to draw the line somewhere, and ZTE is on the other side of that line.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and this is where, I had read something the other day that said, since 2004, the United States has not lost a trade case in front of the WTO. We haven't lost any of the trade cases with China, and yet we still continue to lose. I mean, we win the cases, but the industries are still gone. The harm is done. The jobs are lost. The economic prosperity for this country gone. But they keep losing. We keep winning, but we end up with the short end of the winning stick, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way you put it, because that's an interesting statistic, and it is, it's quite misleading. Because it is true to say that when we've been bringing cases against WTO, we've been winning them. But then the question you have to ask is like, well, what have the results been? And when you look at the results, China will pop up a trade barrier or a tax incentive or a subsidy somewhere else, even though they may have just torn the one down that the WTO said they had to tear down. And it's like playing a game of whack-a-mole. And you can't do that all the time. It can be incredibly frustrating to do that. And so we keep having the same expectation that if we take a WTO case and we win it, China will change its behavior and we'll see a measurable difference in our trade relationship. That hasn't happened. And so anybody who expects the same thing is probably smoking something, because, there's nothing that indicates to me that China is going to change its behavior pattern in response to Donald Trump, unless there is a different approach. And that doesn't mean necessarily giving up on the WTO altogether. We have serious flaws with it, but we shouldn't count on the WTO to be looking out for the interests of American workers. We have to do a lot of that ourselves. And it involves the Congress, it involves the president, it involves a very sophisticated approach. But going the WTO route alone just doesn't make sense, because you can't demonstrate anywhere, that even though we've won some of these cases, that we've seen a measurable difference in the imbalances that we've seen with China, in the unfair trade practices that they have erected. And as you indicated, Rick, it's especially concerning as we look ahead, because it's not only steel and aluminum, it's also semiconductors, artificial intelligence, robotics, advanced batteries, autonomous vehicles, aerospace platforms, biotechnology, a lot of the industries that we look at being 21st century industries as well. And that's, we can't afford to just literally give those industries away.
No, I'm right there with you. And you basically named all of the industries their China Made 2025 plan is going to go after. And
right.
For me, when I look at this, they have a vision of where they want their entire economy to go. So they're giving cheap loans and deregulating, and they're doing all kind of mercantilist kind of things, to where we're kind of okay, whatever. There doesn't seem to be a major plan. And they're really eating our lunch. I mean, and this is where I think people, where Trump, the blind squirrel found a nut in this. He's right. China cheats. I'm still waiting for them to label them as currency manipulators. There's a lot we should and can be doing. And this thing with ZTE is just completely the wrong way, in my view, and sends the wrong messages, because you're going to say, we're going to get tough. And then, well, we're not.
Right. Well, we're going to get tough, and then the first negotiating tactic right out of the box is to make an enormous concession to China without getting anything whatsoever in return. And it's a concession that would have far-reaching national security implications in a negative way for the United States. That's not the art of any sort of deal. It's not the art of war. In a lot of ways, it's the art of stupidity. And it's not a great way to negotiate. So I think that we have to up our game. I know Bob Lighthizer, the trade ambassador, Wilbur Ross. I mean, these are very smart guys who do international negotiations all the time. I think that, if you gave them an outline of marching orders, let them do their jobs, that they could do it quite well. But, when you have the president tweeting out stuff like ZTE, that does more than gets in the way. It probably makes China question the kind of resolve that we have to really push back.
Yeah, a good point. Let me ask you real quick, the tariffs on steel and aluminum. People are losing their mind over this. And again, to me, it's one of those vital industries that we have to protect on a certain level because, just from a national security standpoint, we absolutely need it. But as a country, you need a productive process. Where are we? Are they going to go into effect? Are we going to give like this? Are we going to give massive waivers? Is it going to be toothless? What are you expecting at this point, given what we see?
Yeah, Rick, I'm so hopeful. So we've seen some of the tariffs have taken effect on the countries that aren't exempt from them. But there are, and those are 25% tariffs on steel, 10% on aluminum. We've made an alternate arrangement with a few countries. South Korea is one that's agreed to a quota on steel that actually will reduce the volume of imports coming in from South Korea. There's some indication that we have deals in the works with Australia, Argentina, Brazil. Where we haven't quite made a deal yet is with Mexico and Canada. That is wrapped up in the NAFTA negotiations with the European Union. And those are both large kind of steel importing markets into the United States. But I will say that despite a lot of really noticeable missteps by the president, the way this was rolled out was terrible. The fact that he talked tough for months and then did nothing had an impact on the industry. Despite all of that, I think it's fair to say we've seen some progress in steel and aluminum, and if anything, it's shown that we can kind of claw some of these steel jobs back. And you've seen a blast furnace reopen in Granite City, Illinois. You've seen a Republic Engineering opening a line of steel products in Lorain, Ohio. You've seen a British company invest in a shuttered steel mill in Georgetown, South Carolina. You've seen a steel pipe maker down in Houston, Texas, that's going to be both melting its own steel and then transforming it into pipe down in Houston. And on the flip side, while there's a lot of complaints about from steel consumers about prices and what have you, the data, at least so far, is showing, yes, there have been some increased prices, but from an employment perspective, from an output perspective, these industries are doing quite well. And they've been doing quite well for a couple of months, and the tariffs have not had a material impact on that. And moving forward, there's some question as to how big or small that impact's going to be. So I'm hopeful about this. But it's the president can't back off, and that would be a disaster to the steel industry. He's got to stay tough on this, and can't afford any backsliding, because all of those steel jobs that have been established, they'd be a risk if you see imports surge into the market again.
Someone take his Twitter account away quickly. I did want to get into real quick, since you brought up Mexico. Any updates on the negotiations? I know we're coming to the end of the possibility of anything happening because of the elections in Mexico and all that. Any words where what we might see, if anything?
Yeah, so I think they may be getting close to a deal on renegotiation. I will say the administration and labor leaders will tell you this. They've reached out more to labor than the Obama administration did on a trade perspective, and have solicited the advice of labor union leaders and workers on this. What's going to happen, I'm not sure. I mean, Paul Ryan set this artificial deadline, which made me chuckle, Rick, because when's the last time Paul Ryan met a deadline on on funding? And then, we have to have enough time to examine this. I mean, how many bills have they passed that are hundreds of pages long and where they've kept them secret and then passed them within 48 hours? I mean, you're probably right now just thinking in your head all the times that they've done this, which has been dozens upon dozens of times. You know, if this deadline slides by a couple weeks or even a month, I'm not worried. I think that they can still do it in this Congress. But at the end of the day, I'm going to look at it just like everybody in the labor movement. Is it better for American workers? Does it make sure that Mexican workers aren't exploited and that we're pitting our workers against each other? Because that would be bad. And are there mechanisms in place to reduce the trade deficit we have, in particular with Mexico on automobiles? I mean, there's a lot of other issues that we can unpack in NAFTA, but I think fundamentally, those are the things that need to change the most. And my test is going to be, how well does this agreement, not the promises, not the tweets, how well does this agreement move us forward? And do we need 100% of that? Do we need 80% of this? I don't think half a loaf is going to work, but I do think that we need to make substantial progress.
I'm with you. The only deadline I care about Paul Ryan meeting right now is his retirement deadline to see him on the road. Last question I've got for you. There was a story this week, I'm sure you've seen it, that the Chinese are investing in a theme park project in Indonesia, $500 million. There's going to be a couple of Trump hotels, some golf courses, a residence, and I'm not sure if it's his or for him. Any thoughts on, does this not look right? Does this look like possible quid pro quo? Any thoughts?
It looks terrible. I mean, there is some Trump tweet on ZTE out of the blue. I mean, just completely out of the blue. That was nothing that had been on the table before. And then this news of major Chinese investment. I mean, I am not an expert on emoluments or anything like that. I don't pretend to be. But how, I don't know how that is defensible in any way. I really struggle with that. And, keep in mind, this is a president who's never been afraid of being hypocritical, whether it's where he sources his own products or his own steel for his construction projects or anything like that. And so is it surprising? No, it's probably not surprising, right, given who we're dealing with. But it's deeply upsetting. And to even bring up the possibility that this could be impacting serious trade negotiations that impact millions of workers in America in some way is really troubling.
Yeah, what I like to remind people, we impeached a president on a land deal that the president lost money on.
Yeah, right.
Just kind of want to throw that out there. Scott, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Always great to be with you.
Thanks for sharing your expertise. And look, we're in interesting times with this president, and I got to tell you, the about face does not give me a whole lot of warm, fuzzy feeling that he's going to move us forward on the trade issue. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
This is why we fight, why we lie awake. This is why we fight.
Finally, radio for the rest of us. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down their decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In the unanimous decision, the court declared that racial segregation in public education was illegal. The case was filed for Linda Brown, a student who had been denied enrollment in her local elementary school because she was black. The court's decision overturned the concept of separate but equal. This legal basis for discrimination and segregation had been established by the Supreme Court earlier in their 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision. The Brown decision overturned nearly 6 decades of legally sanctioned racism. The American Federation of Teachers filed an amicus brief or friend of the court brief in support of the Brown family. The union's motion stated, quote, "The American Federation of Teachers, whose 60,000 classroom teacher members represent the group which does the actual work of teaching the nation's children, is committed to a practice of complete equality between teachers and children of every race. This principle is written indelibly in its Constitution and bylaws." In addition, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City also filed a brief with the court in support of Brown. Even after the court's decision, school desegregation did not come easy. Mobs of angry white Southerners showed up at schools to protest the admission of black students. In 1957, the National Guard had to protect 9 black students attempting to enroll in school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The United Teachers Union led the American Federation of Teachers to expel Southern Union locals that refused to abide by the desegregation decision. The Brown decision helped to launch the civil rights movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
The most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. A new Survey Monkey tracking poll. Yes, it's the Survey Monkey. Just 13%. 13% of Americans say they considered Donald J. Trump to be honest and trustworthy. 13%. I think, me doth think that convicted felons are higher on the trust and trustworthiness list than our president. And congratulations. Here's the thing. Just in the last year, since February 2017, he's only dropped 3 points. 3 points. So I guess there's still a little ways to go. I mean, how much? I wonder what you'd have to do to get the other 13 to go, you know what? No, I don't really trust him. I wonder what it would be. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick. I might beat that 13%. You never know.
See, I think, yeah, I think, look, I'm going, wow, 13%. That's, I mean, yeah, that's almost in pro herpes range.
Yeah, right. So,
I mean, it's just absolutely scary stuff. But I mean, the sad reality is you look at what's coming out of this White House. How can you trust a word? I mean, mind blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into it. The Senate Judiciary Committee has released more than 2,500 documents of the Tower meeting. What did we learn? Anything?
Well, I questioned the release. I mean, what was the complete motivation behind it? But some of it was repetition. I think the committee wants to, quote, do its work. Senator Burr, has been doing this for about a year, I think. But there were 3 parts that were basically, there were some more, don't get me wrong, Rick, but there were 3 basic parts that was some additional new information. And I think that probably is not news, I assume, to Mueller, but it certainly was news to, at least to the media about the meetings, a little bit more detail, who asked for what, who did what. So it's yet to be seen where all of this gels together. It's a little bit confusing for the public, too, because there are 2 separate avenues here. One is Russia, and what does it do in the elections? And the second focuses, of course, on the Trump campaign and what they did and what they knew and who they talked to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me. You've been going this whole time that this investigation's been going on, and Trump's been saying, no collusion, no collusion, no collusion, and now you've got Rudy running around going, well, collusion's not really a crime. Yeah, maybe they did talk to the Russians. Yeah, maybe. Because I remember Trump saying, we never talked to them. I never had any dealings with the Russians, never anything, nothing. And now they're not just walking that back, they're running that back.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, and And look, Rudy Giuliani is continuing in the media, and as I, been asked to analyze this break on some stations today, where they said, well, his legal knowledge, that is not why he is working for the White House. It has nothing to do with legal knowledge. He is out there for one reason, to be a junkyard dog.
He's
right?
changing the story.
Right. To get out there, be the junkyard dog, be the pit bull, get out there, take it on, quote, put Mueller in a corner in the court of public opinion and do that because, he is a face people know, right? Yep. And so that's why he's out there. And it's not by accident that he's doing it. It's like the indictment thing. Well, if you go back to the shows you and I have done, I think we both knew a long time ago that most likely Mueller cannot indict. Now, Mueller can say, here's what happened, and I would indict if I could, but he may have some legal constraints or might have to go through the court system, which could take 4, 5, or 6 years, right? So, that wasn't a new revelation, but the way he said it, he said Mueller has come to terms with the fact, Yeah, so this is all Rudy.
Of course, and look, and I've been saying along, and we've been having these conversations as Rudy's been doing this media tour. A lot of people are saying, he's a doofus and he doesn't know what he's doing. And I came out from the start and said, look, he knows exactly what he's doing. He's muddying the waters. He's changing the story. He's changing the conversation. And look, the fact that we're even talking about, Mueller's team told me we can't indict. We'd said that a long time ago.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean it's
absolutely,
it's amazing to me, and and again now we're going to start with another boogeyman, I guess. First it was that the Obama administration had tapped their phones, which Carter Page, I got to be honest, should have been tapped, and a bunch of those people who have had long time Russian ties. Now evidently Obama had a plant in the campaign. Is that accurate?
Well, no, I think they're more or less saying the FBI had an informant. Is what I read.
Okay.
Giuliani is trying to argue.
They had a plant in the campaign. I mean, when I say Obama, I mean Obama's FBI, because Obama was the president at the time. The FBI.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. Yeah, okay.
Because the way it was framed to me, I got a couple of emails going, see, Obama was not only spying on their phones, he had a spy in their campaign. And I'm going, that's not accurate.
No, because as I understood it, it was the FBI potentially had an informant. And then it's yet to be seen what the informant, was there for. And that's when Giuliani came out and said that if this is accurate, then, basically Comey should be prosecuted. Well, there is a fine line in the Justice Department, how well I know, where they interfere with elections, and that can happen. But let's face it, if you want to talk about interference with elections, if they did have, a mole in the campaign for some reason, not to get information on the campaign, but to get information of something that was going down or the Russians or whatever. Let's face it, as far as interference in the election, Comey's timing with Hillary Clinton. so if anything, Comey was a bipartisan interferer.
Yeah, everyone hates it. Everyone hated Comey.
If we want to look at that. Right. Everybody did.
At one point or another, everyone's either loved him or hated him at one point or another.
Exactly.
Depending on where in the horse race you found yourself. And I got to be honest, I was reading through one of the articles on why the FBI hadn't moved sooner on the collusion angle with the Trump campaign. And it was all because I think everybody had it in the bag that Hillary was going to win. And that, eventually they'd mop up and they didn't want to really get involved in it. Here we are. Hillary didn't win. And the guy who was cheating all along quite possibly could be the guy who's in the White House.
Right. So I don't know who the informant was. It's redacted material, but they're just saying that. And again, Giuliani says if Comey authorized that. You don't know when there's these informants and CIA agents. I was around the Congress, Rick, long enough to know there's a lot of rogue activity, that has nothing that is sanctioned by some of these agencies. Right. It's just rogue activity.
And this is where, everyone goes, oh, deep state. It's the deep state. They're out to get Donald Trump. All these rogue people are out to get Donald Trump. And I'm going, I don't know that I'm buying all of that.
No, like I said, it could happen all over the place. And if we want to talk about interference in elections, Comey did interfere in the Clinton election. And actually, because somebody said, well, as far as how he cleared her, well, it may end up, and I don't know what Mueller's going to do. Who knows? But he may not clear the president. He may say, I would have indicted, or here's what happened. But Comey, after all, if he believed there was not enough to charge Hillary Clinton, he should never have cleared her the way he did, which was to clear her and then trash her.
Right.
Now Mueller would be different because he had an investigatory end to this, and it would be a different scenario for him of what he says at the end because it's a different investigation.
Now, Mueller is going to indict a whole bunch more people, I do believe.
Oh, absolutely.
Tons of people. He may not get to Trump, but if I'm Jared, I'm worrying. If I'm Junior, I'm worrying. If I'm the other idiot's son, I'm worrying. All down the line, I'm worrying. And a lot of this stuff, again, comes back to congressional action then. What do they do once all this stuff is on the table?
Well, I don't think that there is going to be much done. Now, if the House goes to the Democratic side, that may be different, but honestly, it may not too. Depends on how many votes, what's the outcome going to be. You don't want to go after something that you can't absolutely, get to the finish line. So
right.
It's yet to be seen.
Yeah. Let's move on. The ZTE bailout. Any thoughts on us saving a bunch of Chinese jobs at the expense of what I would argue is our national security?
Well, I don't think it's going to happen in the end. Trump was in the art of the deal, the Chinese company, and now the director of the FBI, who serves under the president, Wray, has come out and said, we can't trust this company, and they did put sanctions on them for 7 years. So I really just don't see where the company is going to be able to, get these benefits and have it get through the system. I don't see where it's going to happen. I understand the president wants to do the trade differential, and he wants to get them to buy products, but you got to watch what you're trading. And the Chinese are very manipulative and pretty sly about things. I mean, I think they threw that out there not thinking they would even get a response.
Yeah.
No,
I agree. And for someone who was the Mr. Art of the Deal, watching him with these negotiations, I don't know. I'm seriously questioning that title, and I'm also questioning the title on with what's going on with North Korea. It looks like North Korea's got the upper hand here, and we're looking like the teenage girl who's waiting for that second phone call.
Well, what I think happened here is a couple of things. One, Kim Jong-un being Kim Jong-un. Number two, we have no communication with this country whatsoever, basically, and it's just like Iran. If something happens and the Iranians say something and we say something, it's almost on the brink of war. With Israel and America, for example, when Netanyahu and Obama, who didn't, in fact, they didn't spectacularly get along, and when they would maybe jab at each other, the two countries didn't get a divorce, right? Well, in this case, it's a hermit kingdom, so anything said, we react a certain way, although Trump acted very laissez-faire about it, of what he would do. Number two, and I argued this, and I know who my favorite person is as a punching bag politically, John Bolton, National Service Agency, NSA director, and I suspicioned this, and it actually came out in print today, so I was correct. John Bolton has made two statements on North Korea that could almost sabotage the entire deal because he doesn't want it, and the chief of staff, Kelly, is on the other side of this. He wants this deal to go through. And so Kim Jong-un understands there's a division in the White House, shock, shock, and he's utilizing that to throw a few wrenches in the works to see what he can get.
Yeah. No, as I said right from the beginning, I fear their con man is much smarter than our con man. That's always been my fear. And let's wrap up with the EU. Evidently, the EU saying, hey, stop threatening us. What's this about?
Right. Well, look, when it comes to China, China is sort of like the baby that whines and cries, and it's not treated fair. And we all know that, it's got the giant rattle. It's the one that's manipulated everybody. It's planned on taking our jobs, inferior products here. We know the story. Now, the European Union is a bit different. They really are not hostile to us. It's Europe. It's not the, communist China, so they're not hostile to us. And I think what they're saying is, whoa, we're willing to talk about this. Let's not, take the hammer over us like you they didn't say like he would China, but like he is China. And so I think they're asking for, some talks versus we don't like this direction of how you're treating us.
Yeah. And the other part of this is by pulling out of the Iran deal, do we start sanctioning them for dealing with Iran?
Well, you hit the jackpot. Nobody has raised this enough. What do we do? Do they violate our sanctions? And then what were we going to sanction? Germany, England, France? Really?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of that's a big part of the question.
Right.
It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Bob, I appreciate the time, man.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff.
Okay, thank you.
As always, our good friend Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show. Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Yeah, 13%. I'm stuck on that. 13% of us think Donald Trump is trustworthy and honest. 13%. Where are those 13%? Must be like the guy that I've been going back and forth with on the Twitters who works for the Postal Service, who thinks he got everything because he's wonderful and the union did nothing and the union's horrible. Oh, my goodness. Oh, man, what a day. Anyway, also from the Survey Monkey tracking poll, the 13%. Yeah. Evidently, 35% of folks believe Trump has the ability to get things done. 33% say he's tough enough to get the job done. And 41% say that he stands up for what he believes. And I got to be honest, I don't know how you come to any of those, given what we've seen over the last couple of months. The idea of standing up for what he believes in. Did we miss the whole ZTE about face? I'm expecting the tariff about face. The only thing I think he really, truly believes is he really wants a wall. And not because he cares about immigration, but because big, beautiful wall, a monument to him. That's my thought on it. I mean, it's sad, but it is what it is. And I know Rudy Giuliani's running around saying he can't be indicted. And I find it interesting that Giuliani is saying that Mueller's team told him that they can't indict him. I don't believe that for a second. But interestingly enough, Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal, he said yesterday that President Trump could be indicted after he leaves office. I mean, that could happen. He's not above the law. It could happen. And it could also happen, as Blumenthal says, if they go through the courts and it's upheld. I want to remind everybody, Bill Clinton was almost impeached over a land deal that they lost money on. Everybody remember Whitewater? Just for a second, they lost money on that deal, which then morphed into the Monica Lewinsky and all of the shenanigans and all of the stuff with Ken Starr. But they lost a ton of money on that deal. Stop and think about this deal that's going on right now in China. China. I mean, Indonesia, that with Chinese money, $500 million. You don't think that's a sweetener to get on his good side? Come on. You don't think that that's something that was, look how wonderful we are to you? You don't think all of this stuff with Kushner and his father and the 666 building, you don't think all of this are just sweeteners to get on Trump's good side? You don't think all of the money that Michael Cohen was trying to extort from companies was all about trying to get on Trump's good side? I mean, come on, we said it from the beginning. On Inauguration Day 2017, I said, you are going to be amazed at how this administration robs us blind. The kleptocracy will be amazing. The robbers of the past, the Bonnie and Clydes, the Pretty Boy Floyds, the Derringers, all of them, the Dillingers, all of them are going to be in awe at how this administration robbed from the poor and gave to the rich. It's going to be amazing. And I'm telling you, we're the ones getting fleeced. It just is what it is. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. French President Emmanuel Macron said Thursday it's up to European businesses whether or not to keep on doing business in Iran, following a threat from the U.S. that they could be targeted by new financial sanctions. Macron's remarks come a day after French energy giant Total said it would scrap $1 billion in planned investments within Iran.
We're not going to impose French businesses to stay in Iran. The French president is not the CEO of Total. I would like French businesses to have a possibility of staying, depending on the relevance of the Iran market.
But Macron did say he hoped small and medium businesses less exposed to American markets could continue trading with Iran if they wanted to. Their inevitable decisions could have significant ramifications, since Iranian officials say the country will only continue to abide by the nuclear deal so long as it receives the full economic benefits the deal was supposed to provide. And an Ebola outbreak that first emerged in early April in the jungles of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has now spread to Mbandaka, a city of roughly 1 million people. That's a worrying development given that new infections in recent weeks have been confined to rural areas with low population density. But while exposure tracking just got a whole lot more difficult, there are reasons to believe this year's Ebola outbreak can be controlled. Some 4,000 doses of an experimental Ebola vaccine created by the pharmaceutical company Merck have already been sent out to impacted areas, and all international medical personnel heading to Congo to fight the outbreak have the option of being vaccinated before arrival. An estimated 11,000 people were killed during the world's most severe Ebola outbreak, which occurred from 2014 to 2015 in West Africa. Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Yeah, this one's for the workers who toil night and day, by hand and by brain, to earn your pay, who for centuries on past for no more than your bread, have bled for your
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So Donald Trump marked the 1-year anniversary of the Mueller investigation by once again, of course, saying that Obama was spying on him. Then there was the whole, they planted someone. And then there was the whole, it's now bigger than Watergate. There's all kinds of fun, interesting stuff going on that just makes you go, how exactly did we get to this place? How exactly is this working out? I mean, come on. Just remarkable on so many levels to me. It's absolutely incredible that it's just happened. Anyway, so what's going on is, yesterday we talked a lot about the guy from Oklahoma. And this is one of those things where you just go, you got the guy from Oklahoma, Republican candidate for governor. He's talking, hey, we should just get rid of those poor people, those lazy people, those hungry people, those disabled. Just get rid of them. Just get rid of them all because they're all bad anyway. They're all lazy. Hey, if they can take care of themselves, great. If not, the punchline, let them starve to death. And you go, yep, I've been saying this for a long time. That's the Republican Party's bumper sticker for the future. It is who they are. They're the pay or die party. And if you don't have the money, sorry, brother, good luck on the street corner. Anyway, let's get some thoughts from our favorite reporter from Raw Story, Sarah Burris. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me. Sorry the video doesn't work.
So Governor Barnett, huh? Oklahoma gonna make America dead again.
Man, that thing kind of freaked me out because, I've got my grandfather in an assisted living center. So I was like, oh, if this is how it's going to be, then we're going to have to move to Texas.
But isn't this, honestly, Sarah, isn't this what the party stands for? Isn't this what a good number of Republicans have been floating for a very long time? It's just now they kind of feel with the guy we've got in the White House, they kind of feel emboldened that now's the time to, go full steam ahead with their plans?
Absolutely. This is basically what Reaganism, was like, where I feel like he was kind of didn't really care about the mentally ill. He cut funding to homeless populations. He ignored the AIDS crisis for as long as he did. And so this idea of, the weak, the vulnerable, the least among us, right? It's like there's a whole group of the Republican Party who, honest to God, believes that we should just put them out of their misery. And I just don't understand how that kind of morality could ever possibly exist this day and age. Like, this is something straight out of the 40s.
Yeah, it's just remarkable. And I got to be honest, as I was reading it, and and I told you this when we were going back and forth, there was part of me that goes, this is just a troll. This is, there was so much that was inconsistent in his website, so much that, and I guess it's just the lack of political savvy and a really understanding of even how to have an opinion about something, that this guy, just spews stuff that is nonsensical. How much of it can be forgiven as, he's just stupid?
Well, he is an Oklahoma Republican. So, just look at our governor.
All right.
But with my conspiracy theory about him, though, is that I don't think he's actually a real candidate. I think he was asked to run, and he was asked to run so far right so that the front runner, who's the lieutenant governor in Oklahoma, his name is Todd Lamb. Todd Lamb is really extreme. Like, he is to the right of Mary Fallin, who is the anti-teacher crazy governor that's there now. And so this idea of Todd Lamb running for governor, he's just not even close to mainstream. And after years of failed policies, after years of just like a sad economy, bridging, we're like on the border of, both literally and metaphorically, on the border of being Kansas. So, I just feel like this is an example of a campaign where they thought, maybe if we had somebody else to make Todd Lamb look a little bit more mainstream, that might help us. And so that's kind of my conspiracy theory. I have absolutely no proof of that or nothing to back it up. But it's one of those weird things where you're like, this dude seems a little bit too crazy to, even be allowed to file for office.
But it makes sense. If you want crazy to seem sane, get somebody who's really crazy. It's kind of like the old Rodney Dangerfield thing. If you ever saw the movie Back to School, he says, if you want to look thinner, surround yourself with fat people. So, if you want to look sane, surround yourself with really crazy people. I get it.
Maybe it's a strategy now.
But, how much crazier can we get? It just seems to me every day there's another story of us losing our collective minds. I look at this attorney in Manhattan, and I know you've been following this as well. And fortunately, his landlord, I guess, kicked him out of his legal office. But this Aaron Schlossberg, I guess his name is, evidently has been going crazy on people in New York for a while now. This anti-immigrant rant that people are finally now going, no more, stop.
Yeah, what's crazy is that it took this long for this dude to become famous and for his racism to become, worldwide, a worldwide phenomenon, a complete freak show, honestly. And, you mentioned that he got kicked out of his building. They had all kinds of protesters outside that building. They had a mariachi band. They had a taco truck, which is just awesome. That sounds like the best party ever to me. But obviously, if you're going to attack Latinos and anybody who is from a Spanish-speaking country, perhaps you want to avoid that. So they kicked him out. And what's really funny is that his own security guards of the building were horrified by it, and they were hoping that he would come in so they could just throw a shoe at him. That's what they said.
And obviously they didn't have guns.
Yeah, I mean, these are just security guards, and most of those guys are either former cops or former military, or I mean, in my case, it was just a sweet little old man in my building for a while. But yeah, this is just the weirdest thing, and there are so many videos of him. I mean, once this came out, everybody started posting, be like, "Oh my God, I know that guy. Here's the video that I took of him at this weird anti-Jewish protest, or this weird, pro-Trump rally or something." Because he's an avid pro-Trump fan, of course. So, I mean, here you go. And every racist in America, you now have your perfect lawyer. Since Michael Cohen is kind of busy right now.
Yeah, look at that. I mean, well, there's always David Duke. I mean, I'm sure he can help a little bit. Now, look, I guess this Schlossberg's going to need a job. Maybe the Trump administration can now find a lawyer.
Maybe. There you go. Like, this dude would be perfect for the White House.
Right up their alley. Yeah, because the one they've got, evidently they're not paying Giuliani, which you go, hey, that's probably, for what he's doing, probably not a bad price.
Yeah, I mean, he seems to be sort of running things into the ground and completely screwing everything up, which, hey, more power to him. Here, have another microphone.
No, I'm arguing that he's doing exactly what their plan is. They're trying to muddy the waters to the point. I mean, the epiphany today is evidently Obama and the FBI and the Justice Department planted spies in the campaign.
Yeah, and that has been a conspiracy theory that Rush Limbaugh's been pushing out a little bit. So you know that if it started there, it's probably going to be make-believe. But you're exactly right. They're trying to muddy the waters. They're trying to confuse the American public and spin their own reality, which is what they've done for the last 2 years. I don't think that's going to work with Robert Mueller. I don't think he cares. And I think when you impanel a grand jury who has millions of pages of documents over this, trying to put Giuliani on Fox News and putting that up against 1.2 million pages of documents saying otherwise is probably not going to do anything for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to me now. And there's part of me that goes, maybe the FBI should have had people within the campaign with all of that we're now finding out about all of the ties that they've had with the Russians. And even Giuliani is now coming around and going, well, they had ties. And because Trump himself was saying, no ties, no buildings, no dealings, nothing. And they're
it's a witch hunt.
Yeah, witch hunt, hoax, all that. And now they're running that back to saying, well, we had those connections. Yeah, all that stuff happened, but it's not collusion. And by the way, collusion's not illegal.
Yeah, that was the crazy thing that he just sort of said in passing, and nobody really picked up on it, where he said, well, yeah, we got all of this dirt on Clinton, but we never used it, so therefore it's not illegal. And it's like, dude, that's not how that works. That's not how any of this works.
I mean, it's amazing to me. But, here's the thing. Fox News was running that narrative about a year ago. It was their narrative. Well, of course, collusion's not illegal. Hillary Clinton colludes with people all the time. Obama colludes. And you go, no, they weren't doing it with a foreign adversary. They weren't doing it with a leader and a government that wants to bring us down. Just kind of throwing that out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the collusion. I mean, everybody keeps using that word. What it really is, legally speaking, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not an attorney, though I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express a couple of years ago. And
anointed.
Right. It's a conspiracy. The crime of conspiracy with a foreign nation to overthrow an election, particularly when that foreign nation also hacked an election. And I mean, that is what is completely and totally illegal. So you can keep saying, oh, collusion's not illegal. That's fine. That's totally fine. Because they're going to get you on conspiracy. They're going to get you on obstruction of justice. They're going to get you on all of the other things. And everybody you know is going to go to jail.
That's what I'm hoping for. I'm really hoping. I got to be honest. I remember when Obama took office in 2009. I was, I had my bowl of popcorn. I was ready. I was ready for the parade of perp walks. All of those bankers who had crashed the economy, all of those scumbags who ripped off old ladies' pension funds and stole from my 401k and made it a 200.5. I was ready. I'm going, yes, we're going to finally get them. Perp walk paradise. Here it comes. And nothing. I'm hoping that this is not another one of those moments where we go, yeah, they did all this stuff, and yeah, the mercenary was in the Seychelles with the Russian assets, and yeah, little Junior was having meetings with a Russian lawyer, and yeah, Cushy is doing his thing, and yeah, Michael Cohen was taking all this money, and yeah, Felix Sater, and yeah, Carter Page, and just go down the whole list, and then nothing. And then there's kind of like an anticlimactic moment where they go, yeah, it's all true, but next.
I wonder the same thing, frankly. My hope is that because we're looking at least 45 indictments now, I think is what we're at so far, the tally. I feel like I need to have like a little marker board on my wall to check them off every time. My hope is that there will at least be somebody that goes to jail. Even if it doesn't happen, though, I feel like if people are found guilty, if it's completely obvious, if all of this information becomes public, and even Republicans start admitting, well, yeah, there was actually some collusion. We did actually speak to the Russians. Yes, there was this bizarre thing happening with Cambridge Analytica. All of those things, I feel like at the very least, hopefully, we'll get some political success out of it. So maybe we'll score big in the midterms. If we don't score big in the midterms, then hopefully the next election will be even better, and we'll get to get rid of Trump and hopefully get a nice, squeaky clean, ethical Democrat in office, just like what happened after Nixon.
I hope so as well, but I still want the perp walks. I still want the jail. Yeah. I want to build that. Trump wants to build a wall. I want to build a jail. I want to build an annex on the San Quentin just for these people, so that not because I do dislike all of them. So that's actually not accurate. But so that it's kind of a monument to here's what you don't do ever again.
I agree. And that is one of the things that I'm also really still with you frustrated about there not being any Wall Street banksters that went, to jail. There's like one person, I think, that went to jail, and it was a low level, nobody. So,
yeah, I can't remember his name. He was an Indian guy, if I remember right.
But this is an example of, this is another incident where justice needs to have its day. We need to prove that justice does exist in this country, and it didn't with Wall Street. So if we go through another thing again where all of these people did all of these illegal things and nobody goes to jail for it, I'm going to be like, come on, what kind of country are we now? Like, is this really who we are, where nobody goes, like, if you're wealthy enough, you get out of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that bothers me. I don't want that to be the message that, if you're connected, crime pays.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I mean, it just seems that basic decency thing. I mean, that's all. And now I'm looking at this theme park in Indonesia. I'm sure you've seen this story, where we're going to have a Trump golf course and a couple of Trump hotels and I guess a residence and all of this stuff. And it's just basically a big, giant, sloppy, wet kiss. And of course, huge amounts of money into the Trump organization, while Trump's president, while we're bailing out ZTE, evidently.
Yeah, this is a great example of corruption at its best. And there are actual laws about this. And then there are these gray areas. And what's crazy to me is that, nobody's really making that big of a deal out of it. And, I mean, maybe it's because it's in Indonesia and half the country doesn't even know where that is. I would be surprised, honestly, if Trump could find Indonesia on a map. But this is another example of somebody being able to screw people over and use their position to their benefit. And it used to be in this country that you couldn't do that was unethical, that was illegal. And now, I don't know.
Well, we've gotten to the point to where it's so bad that we don't even pay attention anymore. I think I've had conversation with people going, I don't even want to know at this point. We've been almost so desensitized that I literally know people go, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Wake me up when it's over.
That's what they count on. That is the one thing that I keep trying to discourage people, because I get it. I'm there. Like, I'm so tired of this crap, and I have to deal with it all day, every day. And if I don't watch it on the weekends, then I'll miss something, and then I'll come to work on Monday and be like, oh, crap, I missed all this stuff. So this is a great case of, I know it's exhausting. I know it's overwhelming. I know it's emotionally taxing, but they count on you being overwhelmed by it. I actually read a study about how your brain processes lies, because, obviously Trump lies all the time. And your brain can only process so many lies at once. So if you throw out, within the context of a conversation, if you throw out like 30 lies, in a speech, your brain can't process all of that. And so I just wonder, is this another example of it, where it's just like, we're going to do whatever we want. We're going to be as corrupt as we want. Something we might, eventually become, be held accountable for, but for the rest of it, we'll get away with it and still make $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know who the comedian was, but he was like, if you kill somebody, they lock you up, and you kill 5 people, they execute you. If you kill 1 million people, they're, hey, way to go, nice job.
It's Eddie Izzard.
You're
almost thinking, well done. You killed 150 million people. You must get up very early in the morning.
Exactly. There you go. But I mean, the crimes are so varied and so many. It's almost, it's almost going to be like, wow, they were workers.
That in and of itself is a conspiracy. That you have these people who used to be prosecutors, like Rudy Giuliani, who knows how to manipulate the law and has gone from, being a public servant to somebody who is using his position and using his knowledge of the law to screw over America. I mean, this used to be the guy who was the mayor of America. This is the guy that everybody was like, yes, you are this progressive Republican who is pro-choice and pro-LGBT, and you made us feel strong and amazing after, this terrible thing happened to our country. And now look at him. Like, oh my God, this is what he's going to be remembered for forever.
No, I mean, I said before, the Dillingers of the world, the Bonnie and Clydes, they're going to have nothing on the theft that this administration has undergone. And last story I wanted to get to before I ask your favorite story of the week. Evidently, we're exporting crazy, because there was a woman at a Tony Hortons or a Tim Hortons, a Canadian woman. Really? Dropping trow in the middle of the Tim Hortons?
Apparently, she was so angry with her service that she just dropped her yoga pants and took a crap on the floor and then flung her feces at the dude like a zoo monkey. And you're like, okay, that's where we're going now.
And the thing is for minimum wage, are you really going to put up with that blank?
Right? I mean, I was making a lot of crap jokes because I was like, man, we got to talk about this crap. And then everybody responded to me on Twitter, and they were like, really? Really?
I hope they've got mental health treatment centers up there. I know their health care is really good. Let's hope mental health is part of that. And finally, what's your outrage of the week? What's your top story? What's caught your attention this week?
Oh, my outrage is, we were talking a little bit about the craziness of campaigns and the way that Democrats placate to conservatives. And my colleague Tana wrote this amazing piece on it, and she was able to incorporate some of her interviews that she had done at the NRA convention a few weeks ago. And basically, it's this idea that came off of a Washington Post article op-ed, and it just basically says Democrats are too nice. Like, they're trying to court all of these conservative votes, which I have said for years, this is a perfect example of, when Democrats have to fight for conservative voters, then that means that they have to vote more conservatively. Even if they don't have those values, they automatically think, oh crap, I've got to, vote my constituency, and those people were leaning a little bit more to the right. And so I just never understood why Democrats couldn't just register people to vote, spend the extra money to run an actual field program, and get people out to the polls.
Yep.
Instead, they want to dump millions of dollars on network TV to capture grandma who's watching Wheel of Fortune. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me.
No, it makes no sense to me. And also, I catch myself doing this. There's, just today, I'm going back and forth with a postal worker who's, a 5. He's a total 5, hates unions, everything about they're all corrupt and they're all bad and they protect lazy people. And I'm going, why am I arguing with this guy? There's no changing his mind. He's an absolute 5. He's one of these people who's benefited wildly from the union, good wages, good conditions, good working conditions, all of that stuff. And yet he's going to, like the woman at the Tim Hortons, fling stuff all over it. And it just, I gotta, it's even myself. I go, you gotta let those people go. Sometimes you can just go ahead, knock yourself out, keep walking.
Yeah, there are so many people who, maybe they move around a lot. That's the big thing I've always said about young people, particularly millennials. We are a more transient generation because we've had to move where the jobs are. So we moved from our parents' house to college, back to our parents' house, to our whatever state we had to move to find our first job, like all of these different places. And that means you've got to track us down. Got to figure out where we are and register us again over and over and over again. And then you've got to make sure you have our cell phone numbers because nobody uses a landline if you're under 35 years old. So, that just makes things really difficult for people running campaigns. But why don't you hire some staffers and make it happen?
I'm with you. No, and stand on your principles. And, none of this, you're right. The Democrats are always trying to be the big tent party and, we encourage everyone and all that nonsense. How about having a set of values? Because I've asked this question for years. You ask a conservative why he's a conservative and why he votes for someone. It's always low taxes, smaller government, and guns. You ask a liberal, why they support liberals, and it's a lot of verbiage, it's a lot of nuance, it's a lot of, I care about others, and while that's all true, the messaging is terrible.
Yeah. It's terrible, and I think the sentiment in general is just terrible. Like, these are not your values. Why are you trying to compromise them when these are things that you hold very dear to you? I don't get it.
It's crazy, crazy stuff, I'll tell you that. But, it is what it is. But, Sarah, I appreciate the time. It's always great talking with you.
It's great to talk to you, too. Have an awesome weekend.
I always enjoy our conversations. Thanks so much, Sarah Burris. Raw Story. Check out her work. Good stuff. Highly, highly suggest. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
As I look back on those decisions, I would not make the same decisions again.
EPA Chief Scott Pruitt, who still has a job, gets grilled by Democratic senators.
In some cities, every single road shut down.
Extreme storms kill 5 in the northeastern U.S. King County, Washington files climate liability lawsuit against major oil companies. Plus,
if they're exercising during the 3rd trimester of pregnancy, they may want to consider not exercising outside.
New study finds air pollution dangers extend into the womb.
All of those dangers and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I love cold country. My lungs are so black I once had the hiccups and a canary flew out.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, in our last Green News Report, you had a story on how global warming is making storms worse. And what do you know? Today we have terrible storms on the East Coast.
Yes, a large and very dangerous storm system caused severe damage in the Northeast this week, including generating 3 tornadoes in New York State, where Governor Andrew Cuomo declared a state of emergency. The storm's record-setting high winds caused the deaths of at least 5 people, knocked out power to hundreds of thousands of people, triggered flash floods, and forced the closure of some regional rail lines. It's another reminder to be sure that you and your family are prepared for these increasing intense extreme weather events. In politics, Trump Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt got a grilling from Democrats in a Wednesday Senate Appropriations Committee hearing.
Grilled Pruitt.
Democratic Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico excoriated Pruitt over the 12 separate probes and investigations into his spending and ethics scandals.
12 official federal investigations of this guy.
Yes, the Inspector General of the EPA said that he will now investigate Pruitt's use of secret private email addresses that bypass public records laws, but it may have to wait until he gets a bigger budget.
He was using secret email addresses.
Right.
A private server.
Yes.
Lock him up.
Here's Senator Tom Udall at that hearing.
Administrator Pruitt, it's hard to know where to begin this morning. Every day there seems to be a new scandal and you at dead center. I'm tempted to say your scandals are a mere sideshow distracting us from the long-lasting devastation your leadership is making on human health and the environment.
Tempted to say, he just said it.
Also in that hearing, Administrator Pruitt claimed that the controversies were mostly overblown, but he did admit
that as I look back on those decisions, I would not make the same decisions again. And I'm sure we're going to talk about some of those.
Oh, just a few.
And the administrator denied knowing that his own employees helped block a federal study showing toxic chemicals are contaminating water systems across the country.
And that study has still not been released.
Right. Meanwhile, just one of the costs of shifting the burden of pollution to the public, a new study has found that the harm of air pollution extends even into the womb. They found that children of mothers who were exposed in their 3rd trimester to fine particles of air pollution from fossil fuels had a 60% higher risk of elevated blood pressure, and that has lifelong negative health impacts, according to lead author Dr. Noel Miller of Johns Hopkins University.
Children who have elevated blood pressure in childhood have a higher probability of having hypertension later in life and cardiovascular diseases.
Another type of pollution, plastic, has now been discovered in the deepest part of the ocean. A plastic bag was found in the Mariana Trench in the Pacific Ocean, some 7 miles beneath the surface. A new analysis documented nearly 3,500 pieces of plastic pollution and fishing gear on the deep sea floor. Some countries and cities have begun to ban single-use plastic products to address the growing scourge of plastic pollution in the ocean. But some good news, a federal appeals court has ordered a halt to construction on some portions of Dominion Energy's controversial Atlantic Coast Pipeline on the grounds that a permit granted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is inadequate to protect 6 endangered species along its route. And finally, in Washington state, King County, home to the city of Seattle, has filed a climate liability lawsuit against 5 giant oil companies. The county is seeking damages to help pay for the costs of dealing with accelerating climate change impacts like sea level rise, extreme weather events, and ocean acidification, which is harming Washington state's shellfish industry. It's the latest in a wave of lawsuits modeled after the tobacco industry litigation, alleging that the oil companies knew burning their products caused dangerous global warming, but misled the public and investors about it.
These companies are going to pay a price. The question is, will we pay it before they do? I think we already have. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
We have people coming into the country or trying to come in. We're stopping a lot of them. But we're taking people out.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, Rick, at thericksmithshow.com. So, school's about wrapping up, and, what was interesting to me is, the kids have come home, and they're like, yay, school's almost over. No homework. And I'm going, what do you mean? What do you mean no homework? No homework, no real work, no real much of anything. It's almost like playtime for the rest of the year. And we got like 3 weeks left because you know what? The testing is over. The high stakes tests, the PSSAs are now over. So it's like, okay, I guess done. Which is, again, another reason why I'm not a big fan of these high stakes testing and all the stuff that go into it, which is why I've asked Jeanette Dieterman to come talk with us. She's the founder of New York Opt Out. Jeanette, thanks for taking time for us.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So, my kids came home and no homework, nothing to do for the rest of the year, I guess, because the tests are over.
Yep, that's right. Everything is steered towards the assessments. So once the assessments are over, it seems like, now what do we do? That was the driving force of the whole year, and that's one of the things that we're really against.
Yeah, I mean, we took a field trip. I was one of the chaperones to my kids' field trip. We went to go see a baseball game. I'm going, I love baseball. I think it's a great trip, but how is that educational? How is that? I'd rather go to a museum or a zoo, or if we're still allowed to have zoos. I'd rather do some of that.
Yeah, we a problem we often have with some of the schools around us is our field trips are all packed into the last 2 months of school or last month and a half of school because of the state assessment. So for us, it's let's hold off on anything, whole child until after the testing's done. Now we're going to pack in all those field trips. So yet another issue with gearing everything towards these state assessments.
It's really remarkable how education has changed in the country. From when I was in school. To think the way things are now. And I think most parents, especially if they're older, like my wife and I are, we think it's like, hey, when we were in school, it's all the same, nothing's changed. But things have really gotten much more high pressure. And I remember sweating out tests, and I remember sweating out, the midterms and report cards and all that stuff. But this is a whole nother animal.
Yeah, and that's what, a lot of people say to us, oh, come on, I remember taking tests. They don't understand that this is just a completely different thing from what it was in the past. Because in the past, most assessments that kids took were diagnostic. Now, all these high-stakes tests that kids are taking are to serve a mandate, is to fulfill some kind of, thing that the schools are saying you have to do this. Well, why do we have to do this? Is it for the teacher? No, it's for the state. Or the state says, oh, well, it's because of the federal government. So it all seems to be, so far and grossly out of whack from what is a test supposed to be for. It is supposed to improve their learning experience. It's supposed to help the teacher. All these assessments these kids are taking nowadays do nothing of the sort.
I was talking to one parent, and I said, imagine, do you remember taking the SATs or the ACTs? And you could tell me if you think this is a bad analogy. And I was saying, it's the way I understand it. It's like taking the SATs every day for 2 weeks.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, there are hours and hours and hours of testing. Our 8-year-olds are taking longer tests now than college students. And this is just so, not what teaching and learning is supposed to be about.
But we want to know if our kids is learning. If you remember George Bush's thing, we got to know, is our kids learning?
Right. Yep. And that's one of the things that we're always talking about now is when we're trying to explain what it is that we want and what it is that we don't want. Most parents, when they say, well, how will we possibly, that's the argument. How do we possibly know what kids, are learning? Or how do we possibly know if a school is a good school? How do we know if a teacher is a good teacher? And what we're doing is we're using the wrong measuring stick. The measuring sticks that we're using are broken. They don't work. They're out of whack. The numbers are wrong. We're not using common sense when it comes to trying to figure those things out. Most everyone knows, what schools are the good schools and what schools are the bad schools. And what do we say the bad school? It's really socioeconomic.
Right.
It's kids in poverty. It's districts in poverty. It's no funding. Those are the things that make a school a, quote, bad school. And it really is just coming down to resources. But yet we're going to use this thermometer to constantly take the temperature and do nothing about a fever. Oh, yes, it's a fever. Yep, it's a fever again. Yep, let's take it again. Let's keep taking that temperature, but yet we don't do anything to actually fix the problem.
No, you're right.
Because I
remember when we began opting our kids out of the tests, and it's been back now, I guess, 5 or 6 years. I tell this story often. It was my oldest daughter playing school with the other two, with the two younger siblings, and saying, if you don't pass this test, they're going to take money from us, and they're going to close the school. And it was just kind of a matter of fact thing, to where you go, no fifth grader should know that.
Right. And this is we're putting everything on our kids. We're saying that they're responsible now for evaluating the teacher. They're responsible for keeping their schools from closing. They're responsible for making sure that funding is what it is. I mean, this is now they're shifting the responsibility onto the shoulders of our youngest learners, and don't for a minute think that they don't know that these kids don't pick up on just what is at stake when they have to sit for these assessments.
So what is the way forward? I mean, because it doesn't look like these are going anywhere soon. I know you guys have done a really great job of getting people to opt out of it and push the conversation. What should parents be doing? And I mean, this year is already over, obviously, but in going forward, what should parents be thinking about and pushing for?
Right. Well, the first thing is certainly to not participate in the problem. If you participate in the problem is going to continue. We always post memes and things that say what you allow is what will continue. So you can't say, I don't agree with everything being geared to this test. I don't agree with this kind of test. I don't agree with what they're using the test for, and then have your child sit for it. So, opting out is obviously the very first thing that has to be done. So in New York, we have 250,000 kids that are opting out every year, and what that's done is forced changes through. Now, we haven't gotten everything we want because we're up against a tremendous amount of money. This is all about privatizing. So this really comes down to the charter industry, the privatizers, the reformers, and there is just billions of dollars in this market, and that's what we're up against. However, we have enough parents pushing back that we also have a tremendous amount of power, and legislators are very nervous about us, and we are a voting bloc. So organizing yourselves. So besides just opting out, join your opt-out groups in your state. Every state has them, and joining those groups and joining forces and paying attention to what it is that's happening, and being ready to act. So in New York, we'll put out petitions, or we'll have action alerts and ask people to click on something, and it sends a letter automatically to the legislators or the state education department, and keeping that pressure on and keeping that voice raised is what will eventually start to shift things. The conversation has shifted. I mean, when the opt-out movement first started, there was, first of all, no such thing as resisting these assessments. Plus, high-stakes testing was just, that was just commonplace, and it was just sort of the way, the direction that we were headed. And now, the word Common Core is now so taboo that nobody can say that. Now, even high-stakes testing is completely out of fashion. And again, that's because you have to just keep pushing and pushing to shift that conversation.
Yeah, and one of the things that bothers me is, in looking at some of the testing stuff that's in there, it's not even stuff that a lot of the kids have been exposed to. And that's one of the things that, I had asked the teachers before, are we sure that the kids are exposed to everything that's going to be on these tests so that they have the opportunity to prove what they know? Because, when I was a kid, my mother was always like, tests are about, proving that you've learned what you're supposed to know, and it gives you an opportunity to show that. but if you've not been exposed to it, how can you prove how you've learned it or that you know it if you haven't been exposed to it? And that's one of these things with these standardized tests is, you know, they're broad based and there's no real forgiveness in them.
No, and you know that's when we go back to, you know, what is a good test or what is a test for? What's the purpose of a test? These tests don't hold water to what a good test is, and they don't hold water to what it's for. These are not diagnostic tests in any way. These tests were meant to prove that schools are failing in order to privatize. So that if you understand that that's the basic premise of this test, then clearly you're not going to get a test that is diagnostic. You're not going to get a test that actually truly measures what kids know. And a standardized test can't really do that. You're assuming then that everyone is learning the exact same thing at the exact same time, which is really what they wanted, you know, education to start looking like, and that's just not reality. So therefore, when you're giving the same test to the entire state, you know, you are going to have totally mismatched, you know, questions to what the curriculum is, to what kids are learning in this class to this class, in this area to this area. You know, and then you take into account the fact that all of our standards, because they're all basically based on Common Core, they're all out of whack. So now when you have standards that are not appropriate for grade level and they're all over the place, and now states are trying to, you know, mess around with cut scores and figure out how to sort of fake it till they make it, it's, you know, you have these tests based on those standards that will be equally completely out of whack.
Yeah, I mean, I sit here and I think, you know, exactly how much money we've spent over the years on these tests, and, you know, Education Incorporated as a whole. You know, all the curriculum that we developed through charter schools that was supposed to be developed and then passed along through best practice seems to have been patented and then sold back to us. It just seems like, you know, all of this resource could have been used in a much, much better way for students, but it's really not about the students, is it?
No, it's not anything about them at all. This is politics. And they're just caught in the middle, unfortunately, these kids. And, you know, that's what has to change. We have to, first of all, start having people that know what they're doing, actual educators. You know, crazy thought. Educators should be the ones setting education policy.
Yeah, but we don't trust those lazy and greedy teachers. Come on, they're lazy and greedy. All they want is their big pensions and their golden health care.
That's right. And, you know, it's one of the few fields where you don't have any of the experts who are actually setting policy. And it's absolutely outrageous when you think of that this is just none of this, even the tests. I mean, when you think of who's creating all these assessments for each of the states, it's not even educators. So then we wonder why the tests are so poorly constructed, and if they become a joke, well, you know, you don't even have educators making these assessments. So how could they possibly be good assessments? We really need to honestly scrap it and start over and start looking at what really is best for kids. And, you know, I'm not even talking about going back to the way we used to do it. I'm talking about really developing some whole child policies that are going to look at education in a completely different light. You know, everybody talks about Finland. They talk about all these other countries where they have huge successes. Now, part of that is the makeup of their countries, but another part of it is because they're doing something different. They're looking at the child first and saying, what is best for this child? How does this child learn? How do they, you know, even from play-based in elementary schools, there is research that backs that up, but yet we completely ignore research and we just go with the political, you know, pushing of high-stakes testing.
Yeah, grill, drill, and punish.
That's right.
But that's really profitable, and that's what's important. Now, you had done a video that I'm highly suggesting people take a look at over at the Network for Public Education, and we'll get a link out so people can take a look at it, because, you know, I think, you know, we get things in nice 2-minute bites. I thought you did a really good job in this video, though.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, you know, we were trying to show that of the real impact. You know, a lot of times we hear about the stuff that's a little more in the clouds on a lot of these things, but we need to keep the focus on how this actually affects the child in the classroom. You know, we have the same problem in New York with, you know, bills that get introduced, and we're going to do this with the valuation system and the APPR and all this. But then, you know, what we try to do in my organization is we always say, but what about the child? Like let's, yeah, that's great, this legislation, but let's look at what's happening to this kid every single day in the classroom, and is this going to help that? And if it's not, then what are we doing? You know, we just keep losing sight of what this is about.
Yeah, and we've got to allow teachers to do what they do, and that is teach. I mean, at the end of the day, they're more than just facilitators or factory workers.
That's right.
It just seems sane and rational to me. But Jeanette, I appreciate you taking time for us, sharing some of your experiences and your thoughts, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. It's just mind-blowing. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Tell me what you think, what you know. Quick break right back after this. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1954. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down their decision in Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka. In the unanimous decision, the court declared that racial segregation in public education was illegal. The case was filed for Linda Brown, a student who had been denied enrollment in her local elementary school because she was black. The court's decision overturned the concept of separate but equal. This legal basis for discrimination and segregation had been established by the Supreme Court earlier in their 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson decision. The Brown decision overturned nearly 6 decades of legally sanctioned racism. The American Federation of Teachers filed an amicus brief or friend of the court brief in support of the Brown family. The union's motion stated, quote, "The American Federation of Teachers, whose 60,000 classroom teacher members represent the group which does the actual work of teaching the nation's children, is committed to a practice of complete equality between teachers and children of every race. This principle is written indelibly in its Constitution and bylaws." In addition, the United Federation of Teachers of New York City also filed a brief with the court in support of Brown. Even after the court's decision, school desegregation did not come easy. Mobs of angry white Southerners showed up at schools to protest the admission of black students. In 1957, the National Guard had to protect 9 black students attempting to enroll in school in Little Rock, Arkansas. The United Teachers Union led the American Federation of Teachers to expel Southern Union locals that refused to abide by the desegregation decision. The Brown decision helped to launch the civil rights movement. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter @laborhistoryin2.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists are bound to lose.
Let's file this one under for people who need a good beating. And look, I don't advocate good beatings very often. But again, you know, if I'm going to throw out another grandfather quote, my grandfather always said, sometimes you need to slap somebody upside the back of the head, make a citizen out of them. These 4 most certainly fall under the someone needed to slap them upside the head, make citizens out of them. Evidently, there's a website called mugshots.com. And mugshots.com does exactly what you think it does. It collects a bunch of mugshots and it puts it online with your name and all kind of information. I don't know how legal or illegal that is. I know if I were to have been arrested, I would be not thrilled to have my mugshot available for future employers or future girlfriends or whatever, or my kids to see, obviously. But these guys went a little bit too far. The 4 of them went a bit too far. Evidently, what they would do is they would put your picture up there, and I guess there was a number for the web designer, and you would call that number and say, hey, I want my picture taken down. I demand that you take it down. Or in the case of one of the people that was cited in this story, he was arrested and then never charged, and he doesn't have a criminal record or anything, but his mugshot is still there. And he said, I want you to take this down. And they're like, $399. And he's like, no, I didn't do anything. Take it down. And they're like, $399. And it became this back and forth of vulgarity and all kinds of stuff till they hung up on him. Well, evidently, the California Attorney General thought this is a bad thing to do. And he has sought to have them all arrested. And in a 29-page affidavit, they basically said that the business was permeated with fraud. Evidently, according to the Attorney General there in California, the 4 defendants extracted more than $64,000 in removal fees from 175 individuals with billing addresses in California. That's how California said, we're coming after you. Nationally, evidently, more than $2 million were basically, extorted out of some 5,700 people. And you go, wow, what a gig. And now understand that they're being held, one of them in Pennsylvania. A Pennsylvania state judge has held one of them on $1.8 million in bail. The other ones have had their mugshots, guess where, put online. There's some little poetic justice in that, don't you think? That I'm looking at the 4 of them in their mugshots. A little poetic justice. And this one, why does everything have to start with a man from Florida? Just kind of throwing that out there. Evidently, a man from Florida died when his vape pen exploded, sending fragments into his head and then lighting him on fire. According to the autopsy, he had projectile wounds to the head and burned over 80% of his body. And I now am no longer going to make any comments at the TSA counter when they ask about the vaping stuff. Did not realize that it was explosive, but evidently, according to the U.S. Fire Administration, 195 of these electric cigarettes have exploded and caught fire from 2009 to 2016, causing 133 injuries, 38 of them that they rate as severe. So this is why we need to have make sure that the Vaping Association blocks any and all research so that we don't get to know any of this stuff. And also a little fun with guns. Gotta love guns. The gun people, very happy, very proud of their guns, like to show off their guns. Evidently don't know how to put them away. And my wife will like this because evidently the gun was in with the 7-year-old's toys. And guess what the 7-year-old did? What 7-year-olds do? They found the gun, the loaded handgun, and then shot and killed himself. The mother has no idea how a gun got into her child's toy box. The police want to know who it is so they can hold them responsible. And yeah, duh. Hello? I think holding them responsible should be the least of what we do. And again, I go back to this whole gun fetish stuff. People are too blasé with this. I mean, there's this is one of those moments where I go, there's words on the mind. You just try and be nice. I look at this young girl at Kent State, and the picture of her in her cute little white dress, slinging an AR-15 or an AR-10 over her shoulder with her graduation cap saying, I think something like, come take it or something. Look, wanting attention. She's obviously started one of her grassroots groups with her and her boyfriend in it. This shows you how much grassroots it is. And got her attention. She got on Fake News and Friends this morning, tweeted out to Donald Trump, making a name for herself. And this is why, again, this kind of stuff, and I've written her name down because in 5 years I may Google it to find out if she was a victim of gun violence. Because the sad reality is this kind of stuff generally ends very poorly. But hey, she took a cute little picture. and she got the attention she wanted. Anyway, if you've got any questions, comments, missed any of the show, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It's color.